Now let's actually go ahead and let's display all of this expense information in a card-like or a tabular format. So I'll go right up over here, and for now, we are going to leave this code as it is, and we're actually going to go ahead and create a div which is going to act as a container for the table which we are creating. So inside this particular div right here, we are going to create another div. So the first div which we are going to be creating here is going to be the header. So in the header, we want to display a heading like expense name, the expense amount, the category, and date. So for creating that header, I would add another div inside of this div, and I would call this thing as expense header. So I would say expense header. Okay, so now for the outermost div, which is this div, I'll give a shadow so that we could identify the boundaries of that particular div. So I would say shadow dash LG. If I go back now here, let's see what do we get. So we don't get anything up over here as of now because this does not have any content. So for now, let's simply add some content in there. So right inside this div, as this is a expense header, I would add span tags, and I would add the headers as name, category, date, and amount. So name, this is going to be, let's say, amount, category, and then finally, let's say we have something like date here. So now once I have this, I hit refresh, and as you are able to see, now we have that container with a shadow with the header displayed. So now, as you can see, it's kind of stuck to the left. So let's add some margin here. So in order to add up some margin, I would add the margin not to this div, but inside to the outermost div which we have. So I would say I want the margin of 10 from all the sides. And also I want the container to be rounded. So I would say rounded LG. And we should be good to go. So if I hit refresh, as you can see, we now have a rounded sort of container, and it also has some margin from all the sides as well. Okay, so now once we have this, let's work on putting up these expenses inside of this one. So right now, just as we have the expense header, let's create an expense table here right after this one. So for that, first of all, as in that particular table, we have to display all of those expenses. So right after we have this div over here, I will create another div up over here, and this div is actually going to be called as expense table. So here I would say class expense, or rather let's call it as expense row, because this is going to be a row and each row is going to contain one expense. So here, as we want to display multiple expenses, I'll get the for from here, paste it up over here, take the n from here and paste it up after this div. So that means now we get as many number of rows as many expenses which we actually have. So here if I hit refresh, as you can see, the expenses from here disappeared, and now I have to place these expense categories in there. So let's also create span tags in there to actually place them. So I would say span. Let's assign a class of font bold to this one because we want to display that information in bold. And now let's simply cut this expense.name and paste it up over here. So now let's go back, and as you can see, now we have the name like iMac iPhone, which is the name of the product, which is what exactly we want. Now let's also get the amount, category, and date as well. So I'll copy this, paste it over here a couple times. Let's change this thing to amount, change this thing to date, change this thing to category. If I hit refresh, as you can see, now we also have those displayed up over here as well. Now you will be able to see that in the header, these names are kind of stuck to each other, and we want to have some amount of space in between them. So in order to add space, there's one thing that could be done, and that is, if you take a look at the div here, which is the expense header, I could actually make this thing flex, and I could make this thing flex wrap. If I do this, now there's absolutely no space in between them, but then whenever you declare a particular div into a flex, we need to have certain space in there. So here I would type in space on the x-axis. Let's say I want it to be 40. And now if I go back, hit refresh, as you can see, these are now kind of spread out. And that's the same exact thing which we need to do in this case as well for the expense row. So here I would say I want this to be flex wrap, and I want the padding on the x-axis to be, let's say, 20, and padding on the y-axis to be, let's say, 5. So if I hit refresh, this is what we are able to get. Now, still the data up over here is not formatted well, and that's because As we want to display or we want to create a table here, we now need to go ahead and assign some custom CSS classes to this, which actually overrides the basic Tailwind classes which we already have. So in order to add our own custom CSS styling to this one, I'll create another file in here inside the static directory, and I will call it as style.css. And now I want to say that this style.css actually overrides the styling which is present in styles.css. And in order to do that, I would go inside the base.html, and in here, just as we have associated this style sheet, after this one, I would now associate a new style sheet here. So I'll just copy paste this and just change this thing to style.css. So that means whatever CSS classes which we actually apply here, those particular CSS classes are going to be applied to the table which we have. So in here, what we want to do is, for this particular expense row which we have, and for this particular expense header which we have, we want to set the display type of them to be table. So here I would say, get the div element, and from the div I actually want to get the element which is nothing but the expense header and the expense row. So I would go back here, I would say div.expense header as well as get the div.expense row. I want to get them both, and then I want to apply a certain kind of styling to it. So I want to say that I want to set the display type of this thing to table. I want to set the width of this thing to 100%, and I want to add a table layout, and I want to set the table layout to be fixed. So once this thing is done, if I hit refresh, now you won't notice any change here. That's because we also have to individually go ahead and style up these span tags as well. So these span tags which we have up over here inside the expense header and the expense row, they could be styled by making use of CSS. So let's go back here, and I will simply copy this, paste it up over here, and as we want to style these span tags which are present in the expense header, I just need to say span here. And if I want to style up these spans inside the expense row, I simply add a span over here. And now this thing is not a table, but instead the spans which we have, they are the cells of the table. So I would say table cell. So let's delete the rest of the things, go back, hit refresh. Now as you can see, they act as a cell and now they are aligned properly. And also we want to align them to the center. So I would also say text align as center. Go back here, hit refresh, and now the text is kind of aligned to the center. Now along with this, for every expense which we have, we also want to add a button here to edit and delete the expenses which we have. Therefore, let's go ahead and add them up over here as well. So for now, we are going to treat them as simple buttons or simple links for the time being, but later we are going to modify them into fully fledged forms. So just as we have these spans here, I'll copy this, I'll paste it up over here, and instead of saying expense.date, I'll actually replace it with an ahref tag which is going to say edit, and the same is the case with this one as well. I will replace it with, let's say, delete. Go back here, hit refresh. Now we have edit and delete here, and let's also change the headers as well. So here I would say edit, and here I would say delete. Let's actually correct the typo here. Go back, hit refresh, and as you can see, this is what the table looks like as of now. And the date and the category are kind of misaligned, so let's fix that as well. Okay, so now this seems correct, but still it kind of looks misaligned. We can fix that later. But for now, let's go ahead and let's do a couple of things here. So the very first thing which I need to do is, in order to distinguish between each row, I would add a horizontal line in there. So we want to add a horizontal line at the top so as to differentiate between the header as well as the rows. So I'll add an HR tag here. And after adding the HR tag, if I go back, now we have a horizontal line. Let's associate some sort of a margin for that one. So I would say HR class, let's say margin to be 10. Okay, so as you can see, now this table looks pretty much ready, and we have the expenses over here as well. So now let's try adding another expense like iPad. Let's say it's $500. Category is, let's say, personal. If I add that, as you can see now, iPad would be added up over here without any issues. So now the table looks pretty much ready, but we still have this edit and delete buttons which do not look like a button. So in the next lecture, let's fix that and let's actually turn them into image buttons so as to make them look more appropriate. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.